Will TikTok soon be banned in the US? And when it comes to collecting data, what's the difference between the Chinese-owned company and the four US tech giants Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple? I will be discussing that with author, professor, and tech expert Scott Galloway. First of all, really thank you very much for making time for Deutsche Welle, Scott. I would like to start talking a little bit about a Gaffa for our users who are not so familiar with the topic. This is a shortcut for Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. So, Scott, which user data does Gaffa user profile contain?
These organizations know more about you than you kind of know about yourself. And we have voluntarily told them, given them this information. It's not, they haven't, I mean, what they've done is they've connected it in ways we didn't expect. But think about it. You trust Google more than any rabbi, priest, mentor, scholar, or boss. If you're worried about being pregnant or you want to get married or get divorced, you go online and you tell Google what's going on with you. So Google knows your most intimate details.
I wonder, Scott, if you could talk a little bit about if TikTok is actually collecting more data than the US tech giants.
I don't know if it's collecting more data. So if you read the privacy policy from TikTok, it essentially, when you agree to it, it says that it can track your keystrokes. So it essentially knows what you're doing and what you're saying to people on your mobile phone, which is effectively it knows what you're saying and doing with anybody. So I don't know if they're collecting any more information. What I would say is that the danger and the why TikTok might be more of an existential threat to the West than the traditional tech players is that the tech players violate our privacy as a means of making money. They're not bad actors in the sense that they're not a threat to national security. They're a threat to your privacy. They might be a threat to your mental health. They might be a threat to our elections. They might be a threat in terms of misinformation. But their intentions are around the monetization of that violation of privacy. Whereas the danger with TikTok is that there is no separation between the CCP and any Chinese company. And the CCP has a vested interest in the denigration or the decline of Western power. And so what you have is not only the same level of privacy violation, but it might be used to raise a generation of people in Europe and the US, civic, nonprofit, military, government leaders who feel worse about the West. And here's the thing, I believe that the CCP is likely using TikTok to its own for its own objectives right now, and we don't even know it, because if we were to take this interview and splice it up into TikTok-sized videos, there'd be some content that reflects well on the West and some content that highlights the problems and the shortcomings of the West. So wouldn't the CCP and TikTok be dumb not to put their thumb on the scale of content that makes the West look bad? So I think it's a bigger threat to the West than the other big tech players.
Maybe we stick with the West, with the big American tech companies for one more question. Would the US government have any kind of chance to get data from these four big tech companies here in the US?
Sure. I mean, we're still a nation of laws, and they could pass regulation, and they could demand privacy legislation. They could demand carve-outs from Section 230, which is sort of this blanket protection that if they found that certain content was depressing our teens, or certain content had been used to radicalize people who join ISIS and then kill tourists in Paris. There's a case right now, Gonzalez versus Google. Then, yeah, they would. The government can demand this data. The government can, and more so, the government can demand that these companies are held liable for their misuse of this data. So, yeah, I think it's. I think big tech likes to pretend that these problems are beyond our control. It's sort of this illusion of complexity. It's not. We could absolutely fix things. There's no reason we've age-gated pornography, driver's licenses, the military, alcohol, drugs. We've age-gated a variety of things. So to think that we couldn't age-gate social media is just not true. We could absolutely age-gate it.
So, Scott, maybe you can talk a little bit about how ByteDance, that's the company behind TikTok, uses this data for, maybe a little bit more specific than you already did.
The magic of TikTok is it has this algorithm. And that because if you think about Netflix, has a prediction engine. It has AI, but key to AI is the data sets that you feed into it. And if you think about it, they're just prediction engines. So ChatGPT looks at, say, every book that's been written in the last 10 years, and it looks at the relationship between words. And when you pose a question that has a relationship between the words, it says, what color is the night sky? It will go out and look at all the other words that have been strung together. And usually when those words are strung together, it finds that the most common answer is the night sky is blue. And it'll feed you back that language, these large language machine learning systems. And what you have with TikTok is so many signals, so much data, because you have 1.7 billion people swiping up, liking every hour, because you get 30, 60, 120-second videos, whereas Netflix only gets 1 or 2 signals an hour. Did you watch it all the way through? Did you watch something else? Whereas TikTok gets hundreds of signals every hour, so it can begin to calibrate in on the type of content that keeps you focused on TikTok, maintains your attention, maintains your engagement. And the magic of TikTok, that anyone who uses TikTok for longer than a couple hours can confirm, is that your TikTok streaming media show, if you will, is different than mine. And it's striking how entertaining it is. Like, I know I'm into Great Danes, so when it feeds me videos on Great Danes, that's not a surprise. But it feeds me videos of people being adjusted by a chiropractor. I didn't know I would enjoy that, and I do enjoy that. And so what's amazing about TikTok is the algorithm, because of the signal liquidity and the power of the algorithm, is able to create the ultimate streaming network for you. In the US, households spend 11 to 15 minutes a day deciding what to watch. With TikTok, you don't have to make any decisions. It's one channel, and it knows exactly what kind of content you want, because the algorithm zeroes in on it. And it creates the ultimate, most pleasurable, most rewarding, and low energy commitment around decision streaming media service in history.
How likely, Scott, is it, what you think, that during the next election campaign, TikTok will interfere with the US elections? Because they might matter more than since a long time now with the war in Ukraine going on.
I think it's highly likely. I think there's evidence that in the midterms in the last election, that bad actors from the intelligence arms of the Russian government and the CCP were purposely trying to manipulate our elections. I mean, the question is, why would they stop? These intelligence organizations see themselves as our competitors, if not our enemies, and have a vested interest in diminishing our success, or electing candidates they feel are more Russia or China friendly. So why would they stop? I would pose the question a different way. Why on earth would they stop?
Because they might get banned in the United States and other countries. They're already banned in India, for example, huge market.
America runs on money. And you have several very powerful American entities, ranging from General Atlantic Partners to Sequoia Capital, who have invested hundreds of millions of dollars. In addition, if TikTok can figure out a way to operate in the West, it's probably going to be one of the 5 most valuable companies in the world. So the incentives and the amount of money on the line for some very powerful organizations, and also Americans' tendency to embrace shareholder value over security concerns, is so strong that you can imagine a scenario where TikTok is allowed to operate, or they come to some sort of agreement, whether that's storing data on storage here, service here, or even a spin, where they spin into U.S. or European interests. But it could, I don't know. They're making their own calculation. I believe, for example, look at the TikTok, Douyin, the equivalent of TikTok in China. It's their spinach version of TikTok. It's stories about kids who want to be astronauts. It's recitals. It's pianist recitals. It's totally different. It's nothing about politics. It's nothing about racism. Obviously, no mention of the Uyghurs. No mentions even of interest rate policy. No discussion of COVID. It's young Chinese nationals trying out for the Olympics team or playing the violin. So they get the spinach version of TikTok, and we get the Wild West version of TikTok. So the question is, who's dumb, them or us?
So you think there's it's not very likely that the TikTok gets banned nationwide here in the US. I mean, it's already banned in some states on government-owned cell phones, for example.
If it becomes a reality, that the idea of it being banned becomes an actual reality, I think the CCP will likely decide, in concert with ByteDance, to come to some sort of accommodation with the U.S. government such that they can recognize that payoff. Right now, they're going to get both. They're going to get a payoff, and it's the ultimate propaganda tool. If it becomes clear that if certain safeguards or an accommodation isn't met, that they will be banned in the U.S., then I think they will probably acquiesce to some sort of deal, if you will. But, you know, when you say it's been, I mean, we've had some government agencies ban it in the U.S., which is important, but you're probably talking about 0.001% of its users in the U.S. I mean, just to give you a sense of just how powerful it is, and it's when people under the age of 30 were surveyed on whether they'd rather have TikTok or all other streaming media, Netflix, HBO, everything, the majority of them chose TikTok. So you now have people under the age of 30 are spending more time on TikTok than all other media. I mean, that's staggering. There's all other media and there's TikTok. And among younger people, TikTok wins.
Maybe to sum it up, Scott, what are the three biggest dangers of TikTok and ByteDance?
Well, I think it can be distilled down to really, there's the same danger that they all present, and that is these platforms rewire our brain and make us so jumpy and jittery for shorter forms of content, and they're so powerful maintaining our attention that we don't engage in relationships offline. And that part of the algorithm to maintain your attention is to put you into a confirmation bias bubble. So if you're slightly leaning right or slightly leaning left, the algorithm picks up on that and takes you further and further right and further left, polarizing us. If you believe in conspiracy theory, if you believe that mRNA vaccines alter your DNA, it will provide you with more content to confirm that misinformation. So misinformation and confirmation bias and polarization are a huge threat. The biggest threat, however, from TikTok is that it's weaponized by the CCP, and slowly but surely over the next 10 or 20 years, micro-inch by micro-inch by millimeter, we have a generation of American, UK, German citizens who feel worse and worse about Germany, the UK, and the US, who don't feel optimistic about the future, who feel that any attempt to rein in Sino power or rein in Russian power is hypocritical, who don't want to invest in the US, who don't want to have kids, who don't want to start companies, who are supportive of subversive action, who give up on our nation, who have no respect for our institutions. That's Goebbels couldn't have imagined this propaganda tool.
Is there any alternative on the horizon?
I think that we need to come to some sort of accommodation such that our security apparatus in Europe and the US realizes, I mean, let's think about it this way. The majority of young people under the age of 30 spent the majority of their media consumption on one TV channel. Would we be comfortable if that TV channel was controlled by the Chinese Communist Party? Would we be okay with that? I would say no, we aren't. So the question is, well, then what do? You either have to have some certainty that it's a fair and balanced view and it's not anti-German, or you would make them sell it to German interests. I think the solution is I think the analogy is the same. We wouldn't tolerate all German media being owned by the Chinese Communist Party. We just wouldn't allow it. So I don't think we should allow it here.
Scott, thank you very much. And I really hope we can keep this conversation going at some point.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.